All right, hello and welcome back to Who's Even Listening. This will be the first episode of Season 2. So very excited to start this off with video for everybody, and I appreciate everybody that has tuned in on the audio and been patient with us for the video. We finally got it, and excited to show the place to everybody. We got a very nice place, and we got my father here as the first guest, and this will be his third time on the podcast, so we'd like to welcome him.
First one on video.
Yes,
wow, that's exciting.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And as always, there's a subscription link to subscribe. I'll put that in the YouTube link when we have it as well, and a send a text link. And our social media is Who's Out There Besides Us, and I'll drop the YouTube link when we drop this episode as well for everybody to have. And other than that, I think we want to get into, Dad wanted to talk about the aspect of letting go and how we can all, I think work on that as individuals and also as corporations and everything. I think every part of life can learn something from that philosophy. So I wanted you to, maybe start on why you wanted to talk about that so much.
Sure. Yeah. Before I go into that, somebody really did a lot of work on the studio.
Yeah. Yes, it is beautiful. We would like to. Yes, Dad came in clutch with the paint. The paint is by my father. He went very
and insulation.
Flooring.
Yes, flooring. Your mother.
Yes, yeah. Indeed. No, there's a lot of work involved here. A lot of work involved here. A lot of work.
But yeah, to me, I've always been a person who has tried to, for lack of a better word, control things. So if there's a problem, and not that it's always bad, but you want to fix it, you want to be in control, I guess, is the issue. And I think while that has some benefit, it means you're conscientious and you care and you want things to turn out well, it can cause a lot of anxiety and a lot of worry and a lot of undue stress. So when I think about how to handle that, to me, it's letting go and being okay with what is. And I was thinking, driving over here, kind of how to explain that a little better, because everybody thinks of something different in their head. Correct. When you're talking about letting go. What's that mean? So here's what I was thinking, just off the top of my head coming over, and I'm sure thousands, millions of people have had the same example, but it just came to me and seemed to really relate to me. So hopefully it does to you and others. So, like say you're in a stream, and you're in a canoe, kayak, whatever mode of transportation you're in, and, that water is taking you. Okay. You're going with the current, and that's how, we go with the flow. Sometimes you don't think about what that actually means, but think about you're in that kayak and you're going with the flow. So you're going through some times that are just kind of normal. You just have a little bit of current, nothing big, but it's also not still. It's just gradually taking you down the river or stream, wherever you're at. And those times are easy, because you're not fighting anything. You don't really care about being in control. You're just sitting back and enjoying it.
Yes.
But then all of a sudden, you get to the heavy rapids. And then some people are adventurous and think, okay, this is great. I'm enjoying it. Other people want to get out and head to the side and, get away from the current. So I think, the more we can try to say, I'm okay with this. This is part of the adventure. Maybe I wish it wasn't so active right now. I wish I had some downtime. Well, somewhere along this path and journey, you're going to hit an area where you come out to an open, lake or wherever it is, that it's still and it's calm and you've got time for peace and reflection. But instead of forcing that to happen, let that happen. Let that journey go. Be okay with where you're at.
Correct.
We talk a lot about, all of us as humans think, oh, life will be so much better when I get married, when I get over this illness that I'm suffering with, when I have a child, when I retire, when I have enough money to pay my bills. All these things that we're looking down the river, thousands of miles down there and thinking, boy, when we get there, everything's going to be okay. And that control, that wanting to know to control my journey, I think is what's causing us, this stress, worry, and anxiety. If I can be in that kayak and I'm not looking back, we're looking at the past, unless it helps you moving forward. I'm not looking back, and I'm not guessing at what's ahead. I'm in the moment. I'm enjoying where I'm at. If I'm at, just a light flow, everything's great, I'm enjoying it. If I'm at that open area where everything's serene and totally calm, I'm enjoying where I'm at. I'm not looking to get someplace else. If I'm in the heavy rapids, I'm enjoying the adventure. I'm allowing it to happen. I'm not waiting to get into the clear. I'm not waiting to get into the heavy rapids. I'm okay with where I'm at, and I'm more than okay with that, where I'm at. I'm enjoying it. And, that all sounds well and good, but then I thought, well, not everybody's in, light current or calm places or fun rapids. Sometimes you're going over a cliff and you're going over a waterfall and terrible things happen to people.
Correct. You might not have another spot.
So,
correct.
But I think the best way we can deal with that is to, still kind of not fight it, that accept it as part of my journey, accept this as making me a better person, giving me an experience to grow from, to overcome. It's a hurdle. It's an obstacle. It's just changing that mindset and, not to, keep beating the thing here, but, the letting go, the go with the flow. Just wanted to use that example because, if we can think about our life and what's happening to us today, calm, light current, terrible rapids, going over a waterfall. That's just where I'm at.
Correct.
That's all it is. It's where I'm at. And I'm okay with that. And I know it's going to change. The only thing in life constant is change. I know I'm going to get to these other spaces, these other places that I want to be, but I don't want to have any expectation. Expectation, I think, is the killer.
I agree. Completely.
Because if I'm thinking, I can't wait till we get to see that beautiful open area with the waterfall. Well, if I'm thinking about that all the time, I've totally lost where I'm at and the enjoyment of the journey.
Completely agree.
And I think that's what we're doing. We talk about us being like almost hypnotized or living in a way that we're, autonomous, kind of a, we're not really even thinking about what's happening. We're just thinking about the future or the past.
Yes.
But anyway, I just thought that might be a helpful example.
Well said. I'll say I agree with pretty much all of that. I will say that I think it is situational. Then it goes back to what I think we talked about this in the prior episode we had. But obviously it goes back to what we say about, say you're in a situation with a child that can't feed themselves or something. They don't even know how to look at it like that, or and it's not their fault, and say they die of hunger or whatever. Then there is no other stream. You know what I mean? Then it's just that turmoil and suffering for their whole life. And what if that's all they had? Their only stream was a waterfall.
Right.
If that makes sense. And that's where it makes it hard to say that, because certain people do have lives like that, where they really don't have that calm stream at all.
Right.
And that's where it makes it so difficult for, I think, these people, and they get so enraged because it's like, when does it let up? And you get to that point and it's like the bubbling point and you're just boiling and boiling, and it's just, you wait for it to let up, and it just, in a sense, never does for you. And sometimes it may be in your head. I'm not saying that's for everyone, but I do think there is certain situations, like in certain countries and other places, that it is really out of your control to even get basic needs sometimes. And, you can say whatever, but I do think there's a lot of different situations that us as Americans aren't really aware of
How much
and
suffering
open to.
there can be.
Because, I don't think we truly see it as bad as it truly is in some areas. And I think that's another part I try to bring up too. But for our world, for us, like as in where we are, me and you, and people that have a job, so per se, or like we all, I think, create things to make it worse than it is. Like you said, the expectation part is is detrimental to our thought process, because when you expect things, the minute you don't meet them, you're automatically upset regardless of the outcome, just because you haven't met the expectations. And I also wanted to bring up, even with this podcast, you bring up a good point. Say if we're talking right here and I'm thinking about what I got to do when I get done, or I get, it's irrelevant. It's about right now. But we catch ourselves in those moments, even just those little things like that. I might be thinking about what I got to do when I get inside, or what I got to do later today or tomorrow. And like you said, it's really irrelevant in the sense, because all that matters is the second and what you're doing right now. And I think that is the key too, like you said, and you can use that in any situation. You can only work with what you got, like you said. You can only work within your boundaries. You can only work within your circumstance, and each situation is different for every person. But all we can do is, I goes back to the positive in the love and forgiveness side, is try to deal with those terrible situations that some people are in. Even like you can bring up the bomb and these situations that we're put in and out of our control. And it still sucks no matter how terrible it is. It's awful. It's awful. But all you can do is, like you said, is how you handle it in that situation. Right. You can still deal with it with pride. You can still share your emotion. Obviously grieve. Do what you got to do. You have emotions. People are humans, but you also can try to see the good in things. And I know it's so hard for some people that have just such bad things constantly deeming on them and coming to them where they just feel that there is no light. But you have to, in a sense, that's when I bring up imagination as a child comes in. You have to sometimes see it even though it's not there. Just like I bring up like a leader, that's what a leader kind of has to do. They have to, in a sense, show you a depiction of something that doesn't exist yet and show you can get to that. Even though it doesn't exist yet, I have to try to paint the picture in per se. But we have to do that in our own lives, and it may be hard, but we have to try to create in a sense, sometimes you have to, not saying delusional, but you have to sometimes create a environment that's not what you're in. And that's hard. And it's I don't like to say that toningly, because I think you can use that in a lot of bad ways as well. But, you got to try to see the light in the turmoil. Say you're looking at a rubble. Try to find something in it that's good. And that's hard. That's terrible. I would never want the situation on anybody, but we have to try. That's all we can do.
Yeah. And I'd like to add to that, because suffering is the hardest question, I think, for us to grapple with, whatever your religion is, or spirituality, or rationality. There's terrible suffering. As you said, we're totally blessed. I'm totally blessed. And there are people who suffer, for no explainable reason.
Correct.
And have horrendous situations. So we never know how we'll react if we're in that situation.
Absolutely.
But I would say that, we do have examples of people in terrible situations every day. People who are dying painful deaths. You mentioned the war zones that are taking place. People are being abused. All sorts of horrendous things that we can't even imagine. And certainly the best outcome is to get out of that situation.
Yes.
But like you said, not that you can control it necessarily, but we've all seen people who are, suffering on their deathbed, and they still maintain their dignity, their hope, their love, and then others, go totally bitter and, in a different direction. Same way, concentration camps, and some people rose above that and had a spirituality that, despite the horrendous circumstances, kept faith, kept love, kept hope. So, it can be done. Some of us are asked more than others. Yes. It's almost hard to say sometimes if you are suffering that, I don't know, is there some greater purpose? We don't have the answer to that. But, back to the kind of going with the flow experience. If I'm going over the waterfall, I can die a fearful death and, feel hopeless about it, or I can be grateful for the journey and say, okay, this is my time to go. 'Cause we know we're all going sometime anyway. Yeah. So it's not like we're eternal here in this world.
Correct.
So we're in a material world, and I think we've talked before, somebody who has a very short life, but it's filled with love, forgiveness, spirituality, all these positive things, that's a great experience. I mean, we have an expectation that,
Correct.
we should live a nice, 80, 90-year-old life, and good things should happen to us, and our family should all get along together, and, we should have all the things that we need to, go about our day. But, that's just our expectation. I mean, a great life could be, a few years. Let's say you're a child and you've spread joy to, your family and extended beyond that. And maybe you only survived a few years, and,
Correct.
It is obviously it's a tragedy, but
yes.
it's our expectation that we expect something else.
Correct.
So what makes one life, of 90 years versus 2 or 20 or 40, it's
Well, I bring it to this, for example, we got a fly flying here. Perfect example. Flies, on average, if you look it up, and on that type of fly, live an average of 2 to 3 days, basically. Okay?
Right.
I bring that to the perfect example of what we're talking about here. So, and you have dogs that have dogs. It's all perception.
Right.
It's all how you perceive it. Like a fly's life, in a sense, imagine for us if we lived 2 days, but that would, for someone, that would be, like you said, a tragedy.
Right.
So that'd be terrible. But for them, that's a good life.
Right. They had a good
that's
life.
how they view it. Not saying that's how it should be, but but that is a perspective. That's how we kind of have. I agree with that, because we all have. I think it just goes off of we all talk about life expectancy, and obviously we've evolved in medicine to be able to let people live longer, a lot longer than it used to be in prior years. Obviously, that's a good thing. But I think along with that, like you said, you've almost made this. Not want to say certitude, but you have made people almost assume that they're going to have a long life. Like pretty much everyone, assumes that they're going to have a pretty long life, unless you're, detrimental thinker. There's a lot of other people, that have worry, and, you might think otherwise. But I think we all assume that, we're going to live pretty much to our 70. I think most people think that at this point, when most people would say that they would assume that they'll probably live to their 70s at least. So I think you hit the head on the nail that, say something happens to me when I'm 10 years from now or tomorrow, or I may view that instantly as a terrible, awful thing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I could have had 50 more years, and you can't help but think about what if. It goes back to the what if we always talk about. What could have happened? What if I had this much more? What if I did? And you can bring that to anything, but same thing with your life, and then it reaches that expectation that makes you feel that you haven't done enough, that you haven't. That this year's isn't enough for me to feel like I've lived a life, and it is. If that's what you're, like you said, we all have a different timetable, and I think that's the harder part for us all to accept, is that none of us know any of our timetables, and they're all different. And you may have an average of life expectancy, but every single person, our timetables are up for discussion. There's no end point, and even with doctors, there's people that tell someone that they're gonna, live so long, and they live 10 times longer than they thought, or vice versa, that they tell them they're gonna live to their, and they, that it happens all the time. So I think it's just I think it's a mental error that we have, we've created that problem, I think, ourselves, in the expectation of living, past our means in a sense sometimes. Because I think, like you said, we all have different lives. And, back in the day, we talked about before, even in the 1800s, man, or even early 1900s, living to your 30 or 40 was good. I mean, that was considered a long life. I mean, so the perception, how it's changed in just, 200 years, really, of, almost double is the perception now, is pretty mind-boggling.
Sorry, I was looking up something here. I was looking up poem.
Okay.
Do you have many poem readings on your
we
podcast?
can start that segment. Absolutely.
But,
no doubt.
There's a poem that I'm not a big poetry guy, so I'm not.
Poems are very nice.
Trying to say I am, but the one, and I used to read this to you when you were young. It's "If" by Roger Kipling, and can you indulge me for just about a 2-minute reading?
Go
here?
ahead.
If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired of waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating. and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, and here's the main one, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken and stoop and build them up with worn out tools, if you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, gambling it, and lose and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss, if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. That keeps going on. But the main point, I was a little extraneous there, but trying to make is, you treat triumph and disaster the same.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, can we do that in practical terms? No. But
Yes.
can we try to internalize that this is just part of the life process? And some of the life process is terrible.
Absolutely.
For whatever reason. I don't know why, but many parts of life are challenging, troubling, devastating. So I guess it's just our attempt to try to deal with that.
Well, along with that, I do feel that there is a side, goes back to the Carl Sagan philosophy I always bring up too, about the, how we are a speck of dust. And I do feel a lot of our issues are man-made. They're not per se earth-based issues, like as in the world we live on presents them as issues. We make them issues, if that makes sense. Like, I always look at it at a clean slate. I try to bring earth to a clean slate, and like say there was nothing here and no animals, nothing. Would there be issues? No, there wouldn't be. There only is because we arise onto it.
I'm going to disagree with you there.
Not if there was nothing on it. The earth may have, may age, it may, shift, it may...
But to me, we have our human suffering that's much of which is brought on by us. But we have tornadoes, hurricanes,
Correct.
Diseases, all these things that come from somewhere outside of us causing them. So there's this cycle, there's the seasons, there's all these things that, kind of ebb and flow and have cycles, good and bad. The sunrise, the sun sets, the thunderstorm comes through and then it clears out. It's like it mirrors our lives. We have the same thunderstorms inside, when we have difficulties or bad things happen, and then things clear up and we have a, bright spot and some triumphs and good things happen. It seems like it's more, I'm just saying, do we cause a lot of our own trouble?
That's what I was going to say. I'm not saying nature problems, correct.
Totally.
I completely agree. Natural disasters, agree.
But somehow the whole nature of this world and universe that we occupy seems to have the same issues that you're talking that human nature has.
Correct.
So,
I'm not saying that's
so
right.
I think I'm
you
saying...
can make the argument, too, that an asteroid could come out of nowhere and blow Earth up.
Right.
So, there's infinite... absolutely. Right. I'm not saying it, but I will say that if you break it down to the things that are caused, I do believe that a lot of the percentages are not just natural disasters that are our only issue.
Sure.
I would assume, like, for example, the millions and millions of people we've killed over the years of our existence is insanity to me. When you really break it down, that's uncalled for. To me that's human error. That's our misjudgment.
I totally agree. I'm just
those
saying,
types of things.
I'm just saying that seems to be the nature of our world. We're just in a part of it.
Yeah.
So we're having war and corruption and these things. But to me, it mirrors the thunderstorm and the sunrise and the sunset.
Okay, that's fair.
And the tornadoes. I mean, it's all of these. And I don't know why. Why couldn't everything just be peace and tranquility?
No, I'm not saying it has to. It goes back to the four-way stop sign we bring up, and that's not even the point. But I will say, if you had per se a world like that, what would be the point of? I don't know how to explain, I guess, what I'm trying to say here, but I look at it like we still cause all these things. Like, for example, I believe greed is the overwhelming factor in all of our issues is man. I think greed is the reason we have the ego and the demise and wars that we do have.
Selfishness
is the overlaying factor along with religion. But I will say this, when you argue the naturist aspect, greed doesn't cause that. That's, you know what I mean? Like, to me, that's just natural occurrence. We could not have greed in our lives.
Right.
We are capable of that.
Right, but
that's to me where the difference is.
But my point is, for some reason, this natural world that we inhabit has those... I don't like to use the words good and bad. A thunderstorm is not bad, but it has...
It's cause and effect.
It has times when things are peaceful and times when things are very difficult and challenging. And we're we're just a part of that world. And we manifest those things you're talking about in that same cycle that's a bigger cycle beyond us.
Correct.
That's all I'm trying to say.
I agree with that. No, I don't think we disagree in that. I just would say that I think I agree with your analogy with we would have issues regardless, but I do think we still make it worse than it needs to be.
Sure.
That I think we can all agree on.
Sure.
I think we all could do a better job at minimizing the amount of suffering we do cause in our own world. Like, for example, it's just being, in a sense, I bring it up to the politician standpoint, man, because we talk about this all the time about how no one wants to admit that they were wrong or change their opinion or wants to say that, some information came up that made them sway themselves. Otherwise, not many people are willing to do that. But it's the same concept there. It really is to me.
Some people describe it like, why are there these positive and negative forces? Okay. And some people will say, well, you can't really have fully the positive side of the coin. And the example often used is courage. You can't really have courage unless there is the opposite of courage, fear and so forth. So if there was only good things, only courage, how could you be courageous if there was nothing to fight against or nothing to battle against, so to speak?
I feel like you could be courageous in your own life, as in the exploration of your life. I mean, I feel like there's different ways you could use that. I mean, to in a sense, maybe for other people to notice, maybe not, but individually, I feel like you could.
But if there were no fear, if everything was totally peaceful, there was nothing to be fearful of, how would that be? How would you be courageous? It makes fair. Courage, we think of courage, people who have been, maybe in a war situation or they've been through a personal battle. Yeah. That brings out their courage, I guess is a better way to say
I agree.
You bring out your love and humanity when you see bad things happening.
Correct.
More so than you probably could if you never were exposed to any of the negative side.
That's true.
So being exposed to the negative side has one of the benefits, which there's a lot of negatives, but one benefit is it can highlight and expose the positive. Just like when a tragedy happens, people come together typically. Something bad happens in a community. Some people might go a negative direction, but a lot of people rally together and they put aside their differences, and that allows them to grow, become a better people, better society, better people because of their reaction to the negative.
And that's fair, but I would, what I'm going to say.
But I'd still rather not have the negative.
I would use it as... We should still try to do that without those moments.
Yeah,
we should
absolutely.
already be doing that without a moment to take you to do that. That's my... I agree. I still agree with your philosophy because my four-way stop sign is the same depiction. If we all were waving at each other to go, nobody would ever go. Nothing would move because it takes that in a sense, bad guy to just go. So, you're 100% right. I agree with that.
Well, my example was more like... It's more of a reason to try to explain why suffering exists. Because you're stuck with that question, and one of the responses to that is, well, suffering exists to make us grow, and it's only through those challenges, just like lifting weights or training for some physical event. You're not getting stronger by sitting on the couch all day. You're getting stronger by pushing your muscles, pushing them to the limit, having to overcome the challenge of, lifting the weight or whatever it is. And it's the same way in our character. It's built by overcoming these obstacles and pushing against the negatives. Now, is that a logical explanation for why all this suffering exists? I don't know, but it's one idea to try to say why it's out there.
It's part of it. I agree. I completely agree. I think we all need to have, in a sense, lessons that we learn in our lives. But I do think that a lot of the lessons we do make people learn are uncalled for. Obviously, it goes back to what we said. I think there's certain situations that we couldn't handle things differently, and not all of it is. I just don't think that. I think a lot of the people that have issues aren't they're self-induced issues is the issue I have. Like when you have, for example, say you're living in a place that can't breathe the air you're in. Is that your fault? Right. Is that on you? And then you have to. So that's where I have that issue. It's like you can always bring up something. There's always an exception to every rule. It goes back to that too. And but for me, I always try to look at it like I believe it's capable. We're capable of at least minimizing our human mistakes to a point where we still make mistakes, but it's not as detrimental as it is. And I think that's the key for me. I think we need to learn to get to a higher level of thought process. Is for me what it is. Is this it's not about the little things that we argue over. It's not about the little issues. We have to realize the bigger picture that we're involved in, and that it's about more people than us. And that should be the focus, and I do believe that gets lost in translation by these little things. And I think a lot of people, we talk about this all the time. I think a lot of people try to do good, and I think a lot of people think what they're doing is beneficial. Sometimes it's just sometimes I don't believe that we fully have the foresight or the capacity in our brains to see the decisions we make and how they're actually going to play out. And I think if we could, obviously that's not possible, but if we could put ourselves in that spot more, I think we would not make as rash decisions as we do as countries and people, because we all make rash decisions every day. I'm not just trying to point at the government. We all make rash and decisions. We all make decisions every day, but we also make a lot of decisions that are very quick and very irrational. And I think just like in our lives, we do that, just like the government does, and we can really paint a really bad picture from a lot of these. And like I talk about time about the trickling down effect, about how things revolve around each other, and we need to be more aware of that, and how we sometimes make things a lot worse than they need to be, and we can do hell of a lot better job of having a little more morality and foresight in a lot of situations.
For sure, yeah. And we all, or most all of us, think we're doing the right thing,
Correct.
Even though we have totally different opinions of what's right.
Correct.
And that's obviously
that's the hard part.
The political world, one side versus the other thinks they're right and justified in doing what they're doing. So, not sure how we resolve that. But I did want to make the other point is just back to the kind of the suffering question. Mm-hmm. Is a lot of that is our context of talking about like the fly's life, depending on what your belief in afterlife is, if you believe that this is just a speck of our existence and that our energy, our soul, whatever you want to call it, if who we are continues, then this may be such a minuscule part of our experience that it's really microscopic. Where the suffering is obviously horrendous, but if it's such an isolated piece of time that is part of a broad infinity, then you look at it a little differently.
Completely agree. That's a good point. That's a good point.
That can change your perspective on how you view that suffering and bad things humans do. Not to take away from it, but if you believe that this is it, that this world is it, and when you die, that you just rot and there is nothing else, then suffering there's no excuse for it. There's no logic. Correct. There's no point to it.
The end game really makes your expectation what it is, really. And I think that's well said. Because I think that how you view, what happens next, like what is, for anyone, I don't even want to word it that way, whatever you view as the next life or that it stops there, like you said, or that, there's some people even believe in like a reincarnate, like you have another life, you know what I mean? Like, or it just lives on, there's endless, obviously, theories out there, and we can go on and on about that, but how you view that, like you said, really can depict your expectation on how you feel about your life.
Do you believe that the wrongs and injustices in this current material world are able to be corrected in another existence or not? Because if you don't, and you've been murdered by somebody, let's say, or whatever the example is, and that's it, and there's no reconciliation, there's no moving forward for you who got killed to rise up against that evil, and there's no judgment or consequence for the person who murdered you. If everything is just this world, that's it. It's all material. There is no energy or soul or anything that exists beyond that. That's a pretty depressing. There's no good answers to that.
No, there's really not.
I mean, that's a awful circumstance. Could that be the circumstance? It could be. I mean, I can't say. I think there's more to it. I mean, I certainly hope there's more to it. I hope there's a energy, a soul that continues, and that allows for a reconciliation of making these sufferings have some context that makes some more meaning, and ultimately have a conclusion that's fair. Because I think a lot of us, we're concerned about suffering because it's just not fair. I mean, wonderful people who are, do everything right. They treat everybody correctly. They're generous. They donate. They take care of their body. And, they have a terrible disease and they die. Totally unfair. You're stuck in a war-torn area through no fault of your own. You're being bombed. Totally unfair. I mean, it's nothing.
No way to put it.
So, if all it is that, that's a tough way to survive.
No, I completely agree. Like you said, but it goes back to, like you said, I think in any situation, perspective is the ultimate killer or savior, really. I mean, your perspective can either make your life, like you said, in a sense, viewed as miserable, or it can make it viewed as embraced and unique and amazing. So just how you depict that, I think, is huge. But it's so hard to say. Like, as you said, we're all going off of, like you said, it goes back to faith, it goes off to belief of what we want to hope is next. And that's the hard part.
And ultimately, that hits us when that terrible thing happens. When you're diagnosed with a terminal disease, somebody close to you passes away, you're in a terrible situation, whatever it is, that's when you find out what you really do believe or what your worldview really is.
You're almost accepting something.
Because, and like my examples previously, those people who deal with the painful death with dignity, the concentration camp with faith and hope, I think, in most cases, not always, I'm sure, but generally, those people, I think, have a perspective that there's a continuation and that, they're going to be moving to another chapter of existence, whatever their faith may be. But I think that's what allows some of those people to really show that courage and that, be able to maintain their grace in that situation. I hope. I mean, and like I said, until we hit that, I mean, we all hit it in certain ways, but there's a degree, there's small little things which are really just as important as the big things. Like you said, I mean, we don't have to wait for a terrible tragedy to happen. It's how do you respond in the person that pulls out in front of you in traffic? Those little things, how do we put those things in context and have grace and dignity and our ethics at that point?
Yeah, no, because I want to hone in on this more. Because I think that's what always hurts me too when you think about. When you brought that up, it just makes me think is how many people I hate bringing this up, but it's so true because I've even dealt with this in my own life, and I'm sure you might have as well. But like, say for example, somebody has a funeral or something, and somebody that, didn't talk too well of them, or, everybody has a right to make grievances, but it's just people really change their tone in a sense the minute someone dies or something. And that's something to talk about, because we all need to do better about that. It's like, why does it take, that's something that one of my biggest pet peeves, why does it take for someone to literally not be breathing anymore for you to get to the realization of your own self and what you did wrong?
Right.
And then feel bad for it in a sense. And why do we have to get to that point to then accept it? To me, that's what hurts me. And some people don't even get to that point of an acceptance. Some people still don't feel, so there's other, but I feel that way. I don't want to bring the funeral up and all that, but you know what I'm saying. I think that's not just personally. I think a lot of people feel that way, that it takes for someone to, even you can bring it to this, even when someone dies, their signature goes through the roof.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, even just in a marketing aspect, it's kind of nuts when you think about that. It's like, why do we not praise people or praise anything while it's here? Why does it take for it to be taken from us for us to want to emphasize it?
Right.
And that hurts.
And we all do that
in everything.
Yeah, in everything. I mean, you take something for granted. Say you have a home, and all of a sudden, you lose your job and you're foreclosed and you lose your home, and what you thought maybe was not the greatest place all of a sudden was the most wonderful place. Or the partner who leaves you all of a sudden for some reason, and you were kind of sick of them, but now you realize what you've lost. I mean, it happens so many times. Absolutely. That we were talking the other night about just sitting out watching the sunset, looking at the flowers. How often do we overlook those things and take them for granted? It's back to what you said, taking things for granted. And that's why, again, if we're in the moment and we're enjoying where we're at on that stream or that river, let's focus on where we're at on the stream and enjoy it. Let's not try to get off to the side or go backwards, fight against the current to go, the different direction, or, fight against it. Just allow it to move you. Allow the whatever you want to call the spirit to move you, the energy to move you. And that's what I mentioned. Like, serendipity is just kind of expecting good things to happen.
Correct.
And even if they don't, being okay with it. That this is part of it. So. You just kind of almost walk through life a little oblivious, like kind of carefree, and I think that's a great way to live. It's not necessarily easy, but our anxiety and stress and fear is created by expecting bad things to happen or hoping bad things don't happen, or we're future thinking, we're catastrophizing what could happen. Just assume everything's going to be great, and it's okay. And if it's not, that's okay too.
Yes.
That's where you lose it. Everybody's great when everything's going fine, and we're, it's easy to go with the flow. Mm-hmm. But when things happen bad, you got to go with the flow with that too.
As hard as it is. Now, and I want to piggyback on that, because I think it's the perfect way to depict it. Letting go, to me, is how you avoid regret, in a sense. And to me, that's how I look at it. Because if your regret is only usually caused in the past or the future. So when you live in that now, I think regret is a lot of people's issues. We all regret all things constantly, and you try not to, but you do, but it's because you're not living in the now. You're worried about what you did before. But if it takes away that regret and that anxiety of regret, if you can learn to live in that now, because if you're living in the now, you don't really regret things because you're making a decision as it is, and then you don't really think about it, like you said. Now that can lead you to make some rash decisions that become, not great. So I'm not saying that's always the best way to be, because we got to have some thought process. Like, you don't want to, because I think that's where I think the translation gets a little lost, because, living in the now could be, in a sense, someone could take that as, and however they, I'm sure people take that as however they do, but you could take that as just do whatever. Like, it's a you only live once from that mentality.
Right, I got you.
And you could take it that way too. So I do think we have to, still have to have that awareness.
You want to live in the now with the principles, the ethics,
correct,
and all that you have. So it's not living in the now for yourself.
Yes,
I think that's what you're saying.
Correct, but I think a lot of people take that as you can lose that translation.
If you're letting go and living in the now just because you think it's going to help you and good things are going to happen to you, that's not going to be productive. I don't think. If you're living in the now because you're a part of a bigger picture and you're okay with your part, and you're allowing, the total existence, you know what I mean? The everything to move you, whether that's, God to you or the energy or whatever, then I think that's when you have the serendipity of, being plugged in to a bigger source. Because if we're just walking around worrying about ourselves, we're not accessing the source of everything.
Correct.
So that to me is that's the transformation. In Christian terms, it's born again, but it's giving up yourself and you're becoming part of something bigger.
Absolutely.
And to me, that's what we're trying to experience in life, I think, is realizing that it's not about me. I'm a part of a bigger thing, and I want to tap into that source and get the energy from that source and be led by that source and go with the flow of that source.
Correct. No, I agree with that. That's a good depiction of that. I agree. I just wanted to bring that up because I do think the process to let it go, even for myself, like, I think you find time, like it's like you said, you have to have that constant structure of yourself and the principles that you live by to be able to know each situation as you go through it and address it in that manner. As in, like, is this for the best interest of everyone around me or just me? And, you have to make those decisions, those little decisions each day, but it goes off of your agenda and your compass as a person. But I think a lot of people, like I said, I know even for myself, that's why I brought that up. I used to lose that as in, like, for example, so let's bring it to this. Like, I want to go do that right now because I'm in the moment. I want to do it. So I'm going to do it. Like, as in, you can think that if that's the right call because that's what your wavelength's on right now, but then yet you realize you should be doing something else. But then you're almost thinking of the future. That's why I was trying to bring that up, because I can tell say my mind's telling me to go record, but yet I still have to, do something in the house or something. But I want to go record. In the now moment would tell you to just go record, but you have to then almost use foresight to know what you're now thinking ahead that I have to do this first. But that's where I think that gets a little lost because.
But it would go back to your principles.
Correct.
So you should.
But then you're thinking ahead. It was my point because
I get you.
You get what I'm saying.
I get you. But you're being led by, to me, the principles that you think are the source of the bigger creation.
Because then your priorities would be prioritized.
Right.
Correct. I agree with that. But that's all I was trying to say. I think just those little decisions, I think we do have issues finding that balance of, what is good for me to do. Is my brain telling me that I should do this now, or is this something I need to think about and make sure that I don't need to do something else first? But I still think that that's still a process that you have to, build up. Like you said, it goes back to making sure your priorities are in the right place, and then you probably will make that decision subconsciously without knowing it.
Right.
So that's the key. And if you can get to that point, that's really where you want to be, is living in, like you said, living in the moment, making good decisions subconsciously, just because it's so routine to you. That's what you do. That you're putting everyone else first constantly. It's always the decision,
You've given up. It's like, I think I might have used this before, like the automated car. If the programming of that automated car is based upon the principles of, say, love and forgiveness, your decisions in life and what you choose to do is sort of pre-programmed. Yeah. And you're going to, the vehicle, is going to make decisions based upon love, forgiveness, family, whatever you've defined as your priorities.
Correct.
It becomes autopilot.
Correct.
And your decisions, you just kind of, they're made automatically because you know what your priorities are.
No, you're right.
And I think that's giving up the control to a bigger source.
Yes.
The right source. And if you do that, just like the automated cars, I mean, obviously they have some problems, but when they're working correctly, I mean, it's kind of a wonderful thing.
It's cool.
And they probably do better than a human person who makes more mistakes because they're trying to control things themselves, as opposed to it having been programmed in by a much broader, more knowledgeable source, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like when they pre-program those cars, they've got the satellite data from everywhere. There's so much information fed in there that is more than what me or you as an individual knows, about the speed limit of that area and how tight the turn is. I mean, it's all programmed in, and that's a small scale example of us operating versus, the ultimate source.
Yeah.
However you define that, and we're trying to tap into that. So anyway, sometimes that example kind of...
No, that's a good point. I agree with that. I mean, I'm not going to get too into automated cars. But
I'm not...
It's a good point. You think you know my point on that too. But it's interesting. I'm going to get your take on this because I always, when you hear you say the source, it gets me thinking like the way you talk about it. It's almost like, in a sense, like I feel like the way you depict it, in a sense, I don't think you believe this, but it's almost like an extraterrestrial kind of way that you put that, though.
No, see,
because it's like, to me, it's like there's something above us, though, and I don't necessarily know if it's like, I even believe that like there's, when I look at the source, like I'm not saying that there's always a person that's a source per se, but I do believe there is life forms more advanced than ours out there with how endless it is. And so to me, I don't always maybe look at the story. I want to get your opinion on it. I didn't really think, I'm not trying to say it was your view. I take it like this. Like, how would you look at it like this? Like, say there's a better run society out there, people that are a little more advanced than we are. Could that just be to us like the next step? Not saying that they would be the leaders per se, but say like there was a world that came and had a little more knowledge, a little more, society than we did, better cohesiveness. And we were to learn from them. You know what I mean? Now, we wouldn't... This is where it gets crazy. Ancients depict that and stuff in text and all this about other beings coming teaching ways and stuff like that. But this would be the same thing for us in this world. Say something like that happened, and then we got in contact with them, and they were teaching us, in a sense, their ways, what they did to operate, and it was, effective for us. Would, in a sense, we depict them as... you know what I mean? Something higher than us. Like, that's where it gets weird to me. And that's where I look at history, in a sense, and look at the ancient text and stuff like that, about how they've depicted stuff like that. And, like, how would we, in this world, now with even, like, the knowledge we have, depict something like that happening? I'm curious to know, like, would we view that as a godly figure, or would that just be, we would just word it as it is, another species that taught us better things?
Well,
that would be interesting.
Possibly, but I'd look at it like this. So when I say source, I just think it's less oppositional than if you say God, because God has different people.
Correct. I agree.
Different
That's well said.
But to me, source or God is the final culmination. And let me explain it this way. So like me and you are material beings. We're made of atoms and molecules. Correct. So we can be broken down into our parts, our arms, our legs, our head. We can be broken down into skin, kidneys, our organs. We can be further broken down into just little atoms and molecules. And there's really no end in sight, I guess, to how far you can be broken down into smaller and smaller infinity pieces. Okay?
Okay.
So to me, it also works the same way, accumulating things together. So we accumulate the atoms, the molecules to make cells, to make arms, to make bodies, to make humans, to make a world, to make planets, to make everything that we see. And to me, you keep accumulating and adding and adding and adding. And to me, that goes to infinity. I don't know. I mean, again, we're just these pea brains here that, we're just speculating here about stuff that I have no...
Absolutely.
But just logically, it would seem like things keep getting consolidated, bigger, more powerful.
I would agree, yeah.
All-encompassing. And when you continue that on to infinity, to me, that is everything. The source, God, all, everything. And... that's the way I explain it. So are there other life forms out there that are either higher or less evolved than us? I have no idea.
Correct.
Possibly. So they would just be a continuum to me on all this existence that we have, and they would be just like us, a little teeny piece.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
I just wanted to bring that up because I think that for example, I feel like if that situation happened, just like I know you're not you don't really care that much into it, but like the ancient text depicts, in a sense, even sea creatures and like people coming from the skies. You know what I mean? Like in that there were gods that taught them how to do things that they didn't know how to do. So what I'm saying is, if that same context, bring that here to now, if that happened in this world, I do think, not saying me or you, but I do think a lot of people would view them as, in a sense, gods, because you're above. And I think that's where that term gets. That's what I'm trying to bring it into. I agree with getting away from that term, the gods.
I just wouldn't view it any different. If there were such a thing, or beings or whatever, it'd be just like, a dog is different to us than, a cow, and, you progress to us. Yeah. And, we're more advanced. And if there's somebody else that's more advanced, I mean, that's okay. I mean,
I completely agree. I'm just saying that's how it's depicted, even throughout history. Even like, for example, we bring up to your philosophy with Jesus. Jesus was depicted like someone of insane nature. You get what I'm saying? Just because he could do more than and taught things that people view that as that's what I'm trying to say. The symbolism of it that it creates becomes ungodly. And that's what I was trying to say. Like, I just think that same thing, if that happened in today's world, would have the same effect, is I guess what I was trying to get. Not taking a stance on God. I just thought it'd be interesting to see how people would interpret that. I think it'd be interesting.
People have very different interpretations of... Yeah,
I just think that would be very interesting. Is all I was trying to say. I wasn't trying to say you for saying. I just thought I tried to bring it to the same thing. I think it'd be an interesting topic for how people would view that, and I think that's an actual discussion that would probably be a thing. But you wanted to talk a little bit more into the serendipity. I know you want to get.
I think we kind of covered that. It's basically just and hey, I'm the worst at this stuff. So a lot of this is me talking to myself, because if I'm awake at 3:00 in the morning thinking about some dumb issue that's worrying me, I'm not putting into practice what I'm talking about as far as going with the flow or letting go.
Completely agree.
When I do something stupid like, playing sports, I like to golf or something, and when I'm worried about the shot and the outcome, I'm not following my practice on just dumb, stupid little stuff. So to me, serendipity is a good word to try to force myself to let go, not worry about things so much, and assume that what's going to happen is going to happen, and my only responsibility is how I respond to that.
Absolutely.
And, trying to take my focus back to that. So I have some examples, but you guys would be too young to remember, like Mr. Magoo. You ever remember that
Mr.
cartoon?
Because of you, yeah.
So, he couldn't see well, and he'd get into all these weird circumstances, like where he was about ready to walk off the end of the skyscraper that's under construction, and all of a sudden some steel beam would swing around from the crane right to where he was going to drop off, and he'd be just fine because he'd have something to walk across, and the crane would drop him down on the ground totally safe, and he was totally oblivious to what was happening. And rationality would tell you that the guy's going to walk off the skyscraper and die, but just good things always happened. It was just the story was always, regardless of what he was doing, he had no idea what he was doing, but things just took care of themselves.
Correct. Energy. It goes back to the energy philosophy.
So
I agree.
He had no worry, no apprehension. Things just happened, turned out okay, and I think that's a great place to be
mentally,
if you can get yourself there.
Completely agree.
Again, when terrible things happen, then you have to handle it a little bit differently, but you still have to expect that there's going to be some positive outcome. And again, it goes back to perspective. Maybe it's not in this lifetime, maybe it's for a future lifetime, or it's for other people in our orbit, so to speak, that it's a positive for them. So, that's really the only answer we've found to try to deal with difficulties.
No, I agree. I don't think there's any sure answer to that. I don't think there ever will be. I think we both agree on that.
And that's our journey. That's the experience.
That's the part of it.
It
took me a while to agree with that.
And we fight the experience. We fight the experience because it makes no sense to us. Why is there inequity, unfairness, tragedy?
Yep.
It makes no sense to us.
Reasonable sense to us, correct.
So we fight that, we fight that. And I think, most people... Well, some people continue to fight it, until they're gone. But for a lot of us, it's like after a while, you're like, okay, I'm powerless in this fight. I have to submit in this fight to what is and gain as much as I can from the experience and grow as much as I can and help others as much as I can. So again, that's kind of the transformational born again or tapping into the larger source. To me, everything comes back to that. You're either living for yourself and your selfish needs, and it's a battle every day.
Absolutely.
On little teeny things and big things, but we're fighting the battle of satisfying ourselves or satisfying higher principles that, we believe are, all encompassing.
Yeah.
So which path are we trying to go down? And we're slipping back and forth on both paths all day.
We all do.
Every second of every day.
Very well said.
We're back and forth.
No, I completely agree, Pops. But no, I think that was very well put. I don't have much to add. I think that was a very good discussion there on that. I think the only thing we both agree on that we will always preach is just, love and forgiveness.
Yeah.
Is the overlaying factor, I think, in all of it. You have to have that at the core, in my opinion, to create an environment for people to want to live in.
Well, it's funny you say that, and it's really, to me, wonderful that you say that. And I'm getting a little teary-eyed saying this because, you challenged me a lot because I was a very rigid believer, so to speak, and had a very particular thought about the world and religion and so forth. And I don't want to say I really pushed it on you, but I certainly gave you that perspective or shared that perspective and my belief that was, the correct perspective. And you pushed back on that a lot. Certainly, as you should question everything. And you would continue to question, I don't necessarily agree with that, or why is it this way? And you would continue to push back and try to get answers, things that didn't make sense to you. And I was always left, usually at the end of the conversation, to say to you, I can't answer all those questions. I don't know why these things happen, why the world is the way it is. All I can tell you, I have a certain belief, but the principle is love and forgiveness, and that's all I can. In my close to 60 years, that's really what I can come down to say is, my core principles are love and forgive.
Yes.
And beyond that, my pea brain can't really figure out.
No, I appreciate you saying that. Now your messaging throughout my life was always that. Like I said, that's one thing we did have to go to. Don't get me wrong, you made me go to church and stuff, but you never forced me to have to feel that way. I think, we lived in a culture and had a family that, was involved in that, and you even preached that sometimes. So obviously, it felt like, an obligation at some points, I guess is the best way to put it. I wouldn't say you forced me to feel that way ever. And I think I was always, now I look back on it as I appreciated the way you did handle it. You never really, I think I more made you upset or pissed you off more than anything of just how much I'd probably hammer you asking you about it. But it was only just because I just kept wanting to make it make sense in my head, and I obviously never could, and I still can't. And you know me, I still agree with you on a lot of the takes. We still I think have found common ground within our beliefs. We both believe in the same virtues and the same values and the same principles. I just think sometimes, and I think you've come along on my side a little more in that aspect too, that it's just hard for me to believe in that definitive purpose when we bring up like I always tell you, like, if I don't save somebody from saving, why can't he? And those are the questions we can't answer. Yeah. And we went through those battles, and we've agreed upon love and forgiveness. Like you said, there is, to me, no matter, obviously the Quran's going to differ with us. There's a lot of things in this world that don't agree with that. So I'm not saying everyone, but I think encompass a lot of the world. Love and forgiveness is the key to creating a world that we all want to be in. And for me, that's what I want to see. Like, it goes back to what you said. We all want. That's the world I want to live in. I want to live in a world where I'm not judged, where no one else is judged. I don't feel uneasy. I don't feel upset. I want to live in a world where we can be peaceful, where we can have love and forgiveness. We can have open discussions. We can be kind to our neighbors. We can want to talk to our neighbors. We can want to engage with people and be positive. That we got to embrace the world we want to be. And just like, I think it was Gandhi, you got to be the change you wish you want to see. You have to embody that. You have to. And for me, I don't think a religion really matters per se, or you're, like we talk about, independent and anything I do. I don't really try to take a stance, and that's, some people tell me that is a stance, and that's fair. But I will say, for me, I'm open to learn every day, and I'm open to be a good person every day, and I think we all should strive to be that way. And I'm grateful for you the way that I did grow up, because I think it gave me a lot of perspective on things that I don't know if I would have had without that. So I always appreciate the way you handled that, because you never pushed it. And I think that's all we need to do for people. Like you said, sometimes we don't have the answers. All we can do is say what we believe at our core. And that's all we can pass on.
Your ultimate question was always, if there's an all-powerful God, how does he allow the suffering to occur without intervening? If I saw that suffering, I'd be responsible to, if I could,
I'd be held accountable.
If I could help it, that I would intervene and resolve that issue. And that's a question that, there's no way to have any science or
there's no good
logic to explain that. Although just sitting here now, the one explanation or one thought I did have about that is, talking about us tapping into the power of the source kind of fits with what you're saying. It's our obligation to try to resolve these things, because we are representing the power,
I agree with that.
The energy, the source. So maybe the response from God, or whatever definition you want to use, is,
that's a good point. I agree with that.
Is us.
It goes back to
we are accountable to tap into that,
correct.
Because we know we have a conscience that tells us,
correct,
that I think makes us feel these things, that this person's suffering, we need to help them. That's somehow just ingrained in us.
I agree.
And is that God in us,
correct,
that we're supposed to manifest that? So
I agree.
I hadn't really thought about that way.
No,
sitting here, it's like, okay, so like we try to push things. It's kind of like the government thing. We have the conversation.
Yeah.
We kind of push things off on, like, why wouldn't God solve this, or why wouldn't the government solve this? Well, we are the government, and we are a piece of. We are able to tap in to the principles of God or the source. So, it's like maybe we're just pushing the accountability away.
I completely agree.
And not putting it on ourselves, which I think is what you say. That's what you say.
I agree, but I will say that's the same. I literally just made the same argument earlier about how I believe a lot of our issues are
us. So I'm kind of coming back. I'm coming back to support. Yeah,
but what I will say that. Yeah, but once again, it goes back to this, like. Yeah, because how much of it is man created? That's the question you have to ask ourselves. Is all of it truly on our own? Or is there something that's, in a sense, goes back to even what we talked about before? Is there something that's provoking it?
Yeah.
Is there other sources, energies, maybe pushing against, that are out of our control as man, that we can't control, that can't see? So it can get very, very deep. But to me, I guess the why I always say, I have the power, and we all have the power maybe to change situations. But for example, as man, do we have the power to fix eternity, as in like an asteroid coming to destroy Earth? I don't know if we have that capability. Could we gather it? Sure, you could argue that too.
We're kind of accumulating knowledge.
That's the question. Is do you get to a point where only God could save you, per se? And if that point, if it's out of your hands, would he save you? And that's the question I have. Like, for example, I guess the best way we can put it is, I think would kill this, is that if we're in the Empire State Building, or something. I guess you could argue the Empire State Building should have never been there because it's a fall hazard. You could argue that, so no one would have died anyway if it wasn't there. So there, you could take this 1,000 ways. But once again, my argument I'll have is say someone's falling, free falling. No one was there to grab him. He just fell on his own, completely on his own. No one knows. Could be, you can make an argument of a source, whatever you want to say. Just guy fell. Nobody. Only thing, one person. It's last second. Okay, so let's say I look up. I can't alarm anybody. There's no one near me to alarm. It's just me. Okay, and he's falling. All I can do is just basically try to catch him. Obviously, he's going to go through me and kill both of us. But at that point, I did all I can do. You get what I'm saying? That's the point I would give you, is that if I've given all I can give to try my best to save this situation and it still doesn't work, now how does that blame when God probably could have intervened and done something more than that? If that's the only thing I was capable of doing. Right. Now you could argue you could have done something else and done better and be more aware and looked up more. You could argue 1,000 things. Yeah. But if you in that moment felt you did enough in that situation, that's all you could do to try to help. That's where my point would be to that, is that then someone else, in my opinion, it has the power more than I do, probably would have had to intervene in that situation, should have, if he had a good conscience. That would be my argument to that.
But like you said, maybe if everybody...
But you could argue 1,000 things.
If everybody was acting in their best selves... Like you would have had help or maybe something. Maybe there would have been help, or it wouldn't have been built that way.
Correct. That's something.
Somebody would have been there helping that person.
You could have had it that. There's 20 different reasons there.
So
you get my point, though. Right. If it was an isolated situation and you felt as a person, you did all you absolutely could do.
Well, it's funny because
what would that be?
We've reversed positions a little bit, because I started with the nature, the thunderstorms, and the sunrise and sunset.
That's why we have this.
And you saying that it was more individual responsibility, and now we're kind of making the opposite argument.
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. Correct. I think it's a little bit of both. It goes back to the situational aspect. Right. Like you said, obviously, if there's a situation where there's a trampoline right there or something, okay, we got a situation solved. But you get what I'm saying. Like, each situation is different. For example, it's just two people by themselves in the desert. There's no other, person to help, and it's just you're only, and you've done all you can do to try to save this person. You can't, and there's no water around or something. You're just running. You're trying to do everything you can to find water, and you can't. It's just, to me, it's so hard to say that, because I think a lot of it is self-induced. I do believe a lot of our issues, and I would argue 90% are self-induced in our world, but I do think there is sometimes things that are out of our control, possibly, that even if we gave all we had, per se, it might not be enough.
Right. Yeah, we could get struck by lightning.
We might need some help. Is the point I guess I'm trying to make. But no, I agree. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's why we have this discussion. This is why we make these podcasts, because we can all be open to changing our views
see
and
a different
hearing
side
other
of the
people's
argument.
perception, and say, okay, that makes sense. Let me actually listen to that, not just hear it and not hear it. Right. We all need to do a better job in our lives with that, even with our wives, with our friends, not just tune everything out and listen to ourselves. Let's try to be open to, some other interpretation, some other dialogue. Let's be open to have discussions and have them freely and peacefully. And I think we've grown a lot in that department, because we used to have very violent discussions, but now they're a lot more, you get a lot more out of it. And like I said, I think we learn a lot more that way too. And that's the key I try to bring up. You're not going to get anywhere with these heated discussions. You're not going to get anywhere with these arguments that you're going to have, and that's why I hate when I see the courthouses the way they are and legislation the way it is, because, getting animosity and boiled up isn't doing anybody any justice, isn't getting us pushed forward in any aspect of dialogue, and we need to have better dialogue going forward, just in every aspect for everybody, because we all need to be open to talk to someone, even if we don't agree with their views. We can at least give them time and hear them out, and we all are capable of that.
We're all creatures or creations of this world, and we all deserve equal respect. And
well said. Yep, absolutely. Nobody's better than anybody. Yep. Absolutely, we're all equal, and that goes back to the Will Ferrell saying we always say, "Everybody love everybody." ELE, just everybody love everybody. That's all we can try to do. But Dad, I think that was a really good one. I think we're gonna have. I wanted to talk about KSI. I think we're having another one on that. We got pretty good on this one, so we're definitely having another one here soon with Pops. But I appreciate you taking the time, Dad, and we always appreciate your perspective. So,
all right, thank you. Appreciate it,
man. And this is Who's Even Listening, first episode, wrapping up. And this is Who's Even Listening, signing off.